So for our keynote, I've known Carole probably for going on 15 years. She was one of the first persons I met when we started to work hard to reassess and reestablish the Brain Injury Association in Maine. The other unique thing about Carole is she's been all around the country sharing her story. She's been really a wonderful survivor advocate. I can't say enough about the work that she's done and all the time she's spent. And I think the thing that most impressed me about Carole is her very positive nature and really willing to sort of push the envelope and trying new things and sharing new things in terms of the life of a survivor and her efforts to really establish and build a new life. Carole sustained a brain injury in a car accident in 1999. She had to give up her teaching career and her classical music hobby. And she has since reinvented herself as an inspiring national speaker, as I mentioned. And she is also the author of an award-winning book, To Root to Rise, Accepting Brain Injury. And she's also co-creator of the National Get on the Board program for brain injury survivors. So Carole's been active in local, state, national brain injury communities. She facilitates the Wings Brain Injury Support Group here in Maine. She's also a member of the advisory board of the Brain Injury Association of America Maine chapter. And she also serves as co-chair of the Brain Injury, has served as co-chair of the Brain Injury Advisory Council in the state. So please join me in welcoming Carole. Carole.
Thanks, Steve. Good morning, everybody. I am delighted to be here. This is actually my third time keynoting at the Maine Brain Injury Conference. I'm a native Mainer, so it feels especially appropriate to give this speech for the first time in my home state, where I was born, where I grew up. It's also extra special to give this speech at this event because I was born and I grew up as a keynote speaker at this conference. My first speech at this conference was all the way back in 2009, Never Give Up on Happiness. That was my first keynote anywhere, ever. And that speech, it opened the door to who I am now. My second keynote in 2015, Resilience, Handling Life's Wild Moments. That was my first speech using humor, my first speech using a PowerPoint. That keynote, it also launched me as a national speaker. Since then, I've spoken in person or virtually in 14 states, with plans to continue speaking in more. So now we come to this speech, Silver Learnings. The pattern is that with each keynote, I do something new, something that I've never done before. So, what's new this time? Well, generally for a keynote, I have everything all written out. I pretty much know what I'm going to say and when I'm going to say it. Well, today, I stand before you having no idea what I'm going to talk about. Now, before I completely panic the conference committee and make them wonder, why did we hire her? Let me explain what I mean by that. The content of this speech is the 25 lessons that are on the handout that you have on the table in front of you. However, there's a bit of a problem with organizing a keynote around 25 points. There is no way I can talk about all of those lessons in any kind of depth in an hour-long speech. If I was going to talk about all of them, we'd just have to cancel the rest of the day and call this the Carole Conference. So some choices are going to have to be made. Now, I could choose a lesson from each of the categories on the handout that I think is most important, talk about those. But what's the fun in that? Plus, what I decide to talk about might not be what you all most want to hear about. So you, the audience, you are going to choose what it is that I talk about this morning. And that's what I mean by I have no idea what it is I'm going to talk about. So now you might be wondering, okay, well, how are you, the audience, going to choose these topics? Are you going to be raising hands? Are you going to be voting on slips of paper? Will there be secret ballots? Nope, we are going high tech this morning. That's something else that's new with this speech. First time using live polling. Keep your fingers crossed. So here's how the live polling is going to work. Basically, if you know how to text, then you can participate in a live poll. During most speeches, audience members are encouraged to put their phones away. Not during this one. I'm actually going to ask you now to take your phones out, because you will need them in just a little bit. Please keep them on silent, and for now they can be face down in front of you. If you don't have a phone, no worries. Just make friends with somebody at your table, and they can record your votes for you. And we're going to get to those polls in just a couple of minutes. On July 6th of this year, I became a 25-year brain injury survivor. Yeah, 25 years. That feels like an important milestone. A quarter century, a silver jubilee. As I thought about that, I got curious. Why is it that silver is associated with 25 years? I didn't know, so off to the internet I went. There does seem to be some dispute about when the tradition started. Some say ancient Rome, some say medieval Germany. But regardless, the story is the same. That after 25 years of marriage, husbands would present their wives with a silver garland or a silver crown. So I thought, you know, after 25 years of living with brain injury, I think I deserve a silver crown too. So it might be a little much to wear this for the whole speech, so I'm going to put this here in the front. But I did think that I should still honor my 25 years with some silver. So I'm going to make a little wardrobe change. And a wardrobe change needs a drum roll. Oh, you guys are giving me a drum roll. Look at that. Cue music. So why did I just do that? It was not just to indulge my inner rock star and do a costume change on stage, although I will admit that was kind of fun. It was all about the word change. Milestones, like 25th anniversaries, they commemorate moments of change in our lives. Milestones, they mark a divide in our experience, and they turn everything into a before and an after that moment, an old life and a new life. Milestones, they could be planned for, celebratory moments of change, events like births, marriages, graduations, new careers, retirements. Milestones can also be unexpected, devastating moments of change. Deaths, relationships ending, job losses, failures, health crises, like brain injury. Whatever the milestone is, whether it marks a planned or an unplanned change, whether it's wanted or unwanted, celebratory or devastating, any milestone offers opportunities, chances. A chance for reflection, to look back at our journey, to think about what we've learned and how far we've come. A chance for connection, to reach out, to honor those who've taken part in our journey. A chance for perspective, to forgive oneself for mistakes made, opportunities lost, plans gone awry. To step back, to see the bigger picture of our experience. A chance for gratitude, to show appreciation for all that we do have. And a chance for hope, to use knowledge gained from experience past to build a better future. To honor my milestone of 25 years of living with brain injury, I reflected on my journey, and I extracted 25 silver nuggets, pieces of wisdom that I think have relevance for survivors, caregivers, and professionals. So if you're a brain injury survivor listening to this, I hope that these hard-won nuggets speak to your experience and make your journey just a little bit easier. If you're a caregiver, I hope that these nuggets offer insight and open up conversations between you and the survivor that you love and care for. If you're a brain injury professional, I hope these nuggets are pieces of wisdom that you can file away in your toolbox. On your handout, I've divided the nuggets into 5 general categories: coping with brain injury, hard truths, helpful mindsets, accepting a new self, and thriving with brain injury. I divided them into these categories because I think that if you remove the word brain injury, that these are categories that can apply to other milestones in our lives. Whenever we go through a moment of change, especially moments of unwelcome change, these are times when we learn how to cope, when we face hard truths, develop helpful mindsets, come to acceptance, and learn how to thrive. So, as I talk about some of my silver nuggets from living with brain injury, I encourage you to reflect on a milestone moment in your own life. Could be brain injury, could be something else. On the back of the handout, I've given you space to write down your thoughts, today or later, if you choose. So now it's time to figure out which of these silver nuggets am I going to talk about this morning. That means live polling is about to begin, and you can turn your phones over. The way this is going to work is we'll be doing 5 polls, 1 poll for each category. And you're going to be choosing 1 lesson from each of the 5 categories for me to talk about. And I know that might not sound like much, like really? She's only going to talk about 5 lessons out of 25? But in actuality, there's quite a bit of overlap among a lot of the lessons. So yes, technically I'm talking about 5 lessons, but really I'm going to be talking about a lot more than that. I've also put together a video that I'll show towards the end of this talk that will tie together all 25 lessons. So, step 1 of the poll is you have to join my poll everywhere. There are 2 different ways to do this. You can either join via text or you can join on the web. You're joining via text. Once you've done it, then you'll get a text back saying that you have joined my poll everywhere. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to join the poll. If people at your table are struggling, you'll help each other to join. And I'll ask you in a minute or so to start giving me some thumbs up that when everybody has joined. All right, how's everybody doing? Start giving me some thumbs up. Looks like, all right, looks like we got critical mass here. So the way that you're going to be voting on this is, you see the handout in front of you? The lessons are numbered 1 through 25. When you're going to vote, you will vote by texting the number of the lesson that you want to vote for. We're going to be doing the coping one first. That's numbers 1 through 5. So let's say that you wanted to choose the third one, you would just text the number 3. If you're on the web, it's pretty obvious. You just click on that one. And then we're going to be seeing the results live on the screen as the polls come in. Okay, I think brain injury tells is the winner. All right. By just one vote, look at that. All right, so our next poll. All right, I would say that feelings of grief and loss never completely go away is the winner on this one. So the helpful mindset ones. This one you're going to be texting either 12, 13, 14, or 15. All right, it looks like there's a clear winner on this one. And you all chose, where you are today is not where you will always be. Change is slow, but possible. And the accepting a new self one, you're going to be texting 16, 17, 18, or 19. You guys are experts at this now. All right, I'd say we have a clear winner on this one too. Find something the new you is good at. What can you do? And our last poll. You're texting 20 through 25. All right, and I'd say we have a winner on this one too. Own who you are. Don't apologize for having a disability. I experimented with a number of different ways to conduct those live polls, a number of different ways to give you all choices of topics. As I got further into the preparation for this speech, it became clear that it was going to be important for each of the 5 categories to be represented. And I chose those categories because I think that they represent the big picture of the brain injury journey. As we go through brain injury from the early days on through, we learn strategies to cope with symptoms. We confront and come to terms with hard truths. We discover mindsets that help. We struggle with accepting our new selves. And ultimately, we find ways to thrive. So let's start with coping. The coping strategy that you all wanted me to talk more about was get to know your new self. What are your brain injury tells? I liked this image of the keys to accompany our first category, coping. Our early months and years after brain injury, they can feel like a never-ending series of locked doors. Our brains feel inaccessible to us. Our lives feel inaccessible to us. We need to learn ways to manage symptoms. We need keys to cope. I liked this graphic for this lesson because it reminded me of my own early months and years after brain injury. There were so many times when I remember looking in the mirror and just thinking, I looked like the old Carole, but I didn't feel like the old Carole anymore. I would wonder, who are you? I felt like I didn't recognize myself anymore. I hated the new me that I saw in the mirror. I hated what brain injury had turned me into. Part of my definition of being an adult, of being a professional, was being dependable, was being there, showing up, doing a good job, no matter what. But now I couldn't trust my brain to function the way that it always had. I was struggling in every aspect of my life, at home, at trying and failing to return to work, at interacting with family and friends, at pursuing hobbies. Previously easy tasks were difficult, if not impossible. Too much thinking, talking, noise, light, or motion would overwhelm my brain, putting me on the couch for days. It felt like my brain would go from functioning okay to overload in an instant. Overload. I think that's an experience that most brain injury survivors have had. When our brain short circuits, when everything is just too much, we're overstimulated, unable to cope, we are overdone. We might melt down in a puddle of tears, erupt in a spew of anger. The way that I've learned to cope with overload is by getting to know my brain injury's tells. Just like a person playing poker has tells, body language indicating that they're bluffing, our brain injuries have tells, signs indicating that overload is building. The trick is getting to know our new selves and learning to recognize those signs before overload has progressed too far. Coping with brain injury is about learning to be a good self-observer. I am eternally grateful to my rehab therapists, to other medical professionals, family and friends, who all helped me learn to observe and recognize my brain injury's tells. So much of what I know now started with the help of others. I really do think of brain injury, it is a team endeavor. It began with my team sharing their observations, the tells that they could see as my brain was going downhill. They noticed a change in my expression. We called it my deer in the headlights look. A dullness coming into my eyes, a haltiness in my speech, losing my words more. I'd stop talking eventually, furrowing my brow, losing my balance, crying more easily. The problem was that by the time others could see some of those exterior signs of overload, overload was already taking over. To catch overload before it starts, that requires my internal observations, the signs that people can't see, but I feel. Other people's observations, they gradually helped me learn to make my own. It helped me realize that what I feel, what I sense, it means something. And that if I can act on that, stop, take a break, rest, remove myself from the situation, that I can prevent overload from happening, or at least make it not so bad. I can also reduce how much time it takes me to recover. It's not perfect. Sometimes things happen too fast and overload happens anyway. But getting to know my tells gives me a small measure of control. Here are some of those brain injury tells that I notice. I get pressure in the left side of my head. It starts out subtle, it will get more pronounced, eventually progressing to a desperate feeling that I need to lie down. I'll start to feel like I'm talking through jello or cotton, like my speaking is labored. Nobody else will notice any word difficulty findings, but I will know that I'm struggling. I'll have a general feeling that the world is going by too fast and that I'm struggling to keep up. I'll have to talk myself through simple activities, sometimes in my head, sometimes out loud. Now I put on my left sock. Now I put on my right sock. Anything that goes in a sequence, like directions or a recipe, I won't be able to follow. And here's my favorite tell. This one I've only just figured out in the last few years. And this one often precedes all those other ones. It's a sense of euphoria. And it happens when I'm feeling great. It happens when it's getting to be the normal time that I have to lie down and take a rest, but I still feel fine. Or I've just done something that's extra cognitive, but I'm not extra tired. And I will get this feeling of euphoria, and I will think, today's the day. Today's the day I don't need a nap. And invariably, I can practically set my watch by it. 20 minutes later, my brain starts to go downhill, and all the other tells start to appear. The better that we know ourselves, the better that we know our tells as brain injury survivors, the more choices we have, the more power we can have. Socrates said, "To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom." To know thyself is also the beginning of coping with brain injury. Hard truths. When I found this image, it instantly communicated hard truths to me. Brain injury, it is a slow uphill climb, and we get battered by the journey. Hard truths, they're like those icy winds. They are that whipping snow that hits us in the face, that threatens to push us backwards. The way forward is to confront those hard truths, to acknowledge them, to work through them, to keep climbing despite the storm. The hard truth that you all wanted me to talk more about is feelings of grief and loss never completely go away. I would imagine that everyone in this room has had the experience of losing somebody that they love. I would imagine that at one time or another, that we've all been sucked into that swirling, gaping hole that is grief, that we have experienced the profound sorrow of missing somebody that we love, that we cherished. As we all know, at first after loss, that grief, that hole in our lives, it can feel all-consuming. With time, support from others, care and compassion, we can heal. That gaping hole can shrink as we move forward without our loved one, as we accept a changed life. But if you've grieved, then you also know that although that hole can narrow, it never really goes away. We will always miss that person that we loved. We learn to live with that hole, to manage the fact that that hole is now part of our lives. Even when we've moved into a different life, there will be times when grief gets triggered. On their birthday, on an anniversary, on hearing a song, seeing a picture, thinking about a memory. That is the up and down, waxing and waning nature of loss. It is the same process after brain injury. We didn't die, but the people that we were died. The life that we had died. The life that we expected to live died. And all of that triggers a powerful grieving process. I can honestly say that brain injury grief, it was the worst grief that I have ever felt. It was worse than the grief I felt after my mother died. This time, I was the one who died. After brain injury, I mourned deeply for many, many years. I thought that the grief was going to break me. I thought that I am not strong enough to cope with this. It took a long time and a lot of help from many people for my own gaping hole of grief after brain injury to shrink. But it did shrink. Grief and loss, they don't have to be a gaping hole forever. Ever so slowly, I had to move through denial, come to terms with the fact that my old life was gone, learn to like myself again, find activities the new me could do, build community, discover purpose. Working through grief and loss after my brain injury has increased my empathy, perception, wisdom, and resilience, and I'm very grateful for those gifts. But even though I have built a new life after brain injury and healed from the worst of my grief, there are still times when the loss hits me. I miss the Carole that died on July 6th, 1999. The hole is still there. It will always be there. And I've come to realize that that's okay. This lesson is not about trying to close the hole, which we can't. It's about acknowledging and learning to manage the hole so we don't get sucked in, we don't get overwhelmed by it. Here are some things that can trigger feelings of grief and loss for me. They don't always, it kind of depends on the day. These triggers hurt, but they don't hurt as much as they did when I was actively grieving. They're now more a reminder of the sharper pain I felt early on. Triggers can be tasks that used to be easy, but are now difficult for me. Reminders of my old life. A string of bad brain days with increased symptoms. Having to give up something because of brain injury. A reminder that tasks I struggle with are easy for other people. So what do we do when those feelings of grief and loss hit? We acknowledge them. We get to feel sad sometimes. Brain injury sucks. There is no question about it. And we develop strategies to cope, like talking to other survivors and family and friends and professionals. We can write about our feelings. We can make art, spend time in nature, exercise, meditate, whatever it is that helps. My strategies these days usually are talking to other survivors, writing, taking a walk. Those things usually work for me to validate my feelings, work through them, and then return to this new life that I lead now. This hard truth is a reminder that even healed grief leaves a scar, and that scar can be painful at times. Helpful mindsets. How we think about things matters. Our thoughts, our mindsets, they have power. The power to hold us back or the power to move us forward. We might not be able to control what's happened to us, the symptoms that we live with, but we do have some measure of control over how we think about what's happened to us. Our mindsets can help us grow. The mindset that you wanted me to talk more about is where you are today is not where you will always be. Change is slow, but possible. Here's a snapshot of what a few pieces of life were like for me in the first few years after my brain injury. I napped 4 times a day. I had a constant headache. My morning shower would exhaust me so much that I had to take a nap right afterwards. I ate cottage cheese for dinner many nights because shopping for food, planning what to make, and then cooking it was just too difficult. The noise from planes going overhead my house seemed so loud that I would duck, scream, sometimes fall from the sound, even when I was inside. Family and friends had to come rescue me from places so often that the joke was that my car spent more nights away from home than I did. I felt like brain injury had broken me, that I could never accept and like the new me. I gave a 5-minute speech at a brain injury conference, this conference. I wrote a few poems about brain injury. Here's where I am today regarding those same pieces of life. I still nap every day, but now it's once, sometimes twice, sometimes all afternoon, depends on the day and what I've done. I no longer have headaches. Morning showers don't exhaust me. I have strategies for shopping, meal planning, and cooking. Cottage cheese is mostly a breakfast item, although it does sneak back in for dinner on bad brain days. I am still quite sound sensitive. I often use earplugs, but that sound sensitivity has improved. Inside or out, overhead plane noises don't bother me anymore. Family and friends do still rescue me sometimes, but that's much more occasional now. I am generally better at managing my brain injury. Brain injury did not break me. It made me stronger. I did come to terms with and learn to like the new me. I now give hour-long keynotes in multiple states. I wrote a book about brain injury, and a line from one of those early poems ended up being the title, To Root and to Rise. I still have a brain injury, but where I was is not where I am now. When we're in the midst of all the awfulness that life can dish up, it can seem like it's always going to be this bad. This mindset reminds us that that's not true. life is always changing. When life is challenging, I think it's important to believe that it can get better, even if in the moment we can't see how that could possibly happen. It is that belief that gets us through. With that said, there is a reason that it's a tortoise in this picture. As we all know, the pace of brain injury is excruciatingly slow, frustratingly slow. It has taken me many, many, many years to improve to this point. We can't control the pace of progress. I learned long ago that setting deadlines for improvement does not work, especially for brain injury. Change happens on its own slow timeline. But slow is still movement. Slow is still progress. I also think it's important in this picture that the tortoise is in the process of climbing. It is moving. Change, it isn't sitting back and waiting for it to happen. We have to work for every bit of progress that we make in order to see change in our lives. On the bad days, when all we can see is the heartbreak that's right in front of us, this mindset helps us to keep things in perspective, to remember the long view, and to keep slowly climbing those stairs. Accepting a new life. Coming to terms with accepting our new selves is a key piece of the brain injury journey. Acceptance, it might not change the reality or the challenge of brain injury symptoms, but it can change how we experience those symptoms. Accepting our new selves can open the door to happiness and purpose. This graphic depicts the inner peace, the serenity that can come with truly accepting ourselves as we are. The accepting a new self strategy that you wanted me to talk more about was find something the new you is good at. What can you do? Since my brain injury, I can't work full-time anymore. I can't be a teacher the way I used to. I can't be a musician. I can't always think clearly or consistently. I can't always find the words I want to say. I can't be upright for more than a few hours at a time. I can't tolerate sound. I can't tolerate bright lights. I can't drive very far. I can't read for very long. I can't travel on my own. I could keep listing can'ts, but I think you get my rhetorical point here. Can't. How do you all feel listening to me list all those can'ts? I know I feel depressed, disheartened, weighted down, powerless. Yes, brain injury, it comes with a lot of can'ts, many of which can't be changed. And as we just experienced, it is easy to get bogged down in all of them. Focusing on the can'ts doesn't move us forward. It holds us back. So let's flip the script on a couple of those earlier statements. It is true, I cannot work a full-time job, but I can give speeches. I can serve on brain injury committees. I can and did write a book. It is true, I can't be a classical musician anymore. But I can and now listen to music again. I can now go to concerts again. I can and do use my background as a musician to influence the flow and rhythm of my speeches. How do the cans make you feel? I know I feel more empowered, more motivated, more hopeful. Can, that's where our power lies. Part of accepting our new selves comes from figuring out what we can do, what we're good at now. Focusing on what we can do, what our new selves are good at, no matter how small, that can move us forward in unexpected ways. For example, I am here today in front of you because of this lesson. For the first several years after brain injury, I focused mostly on my can'ts. I tried so hard to get back to working full-time, which I could not do, to get back to performing music, which I could not do. I was stuck, focusing on things that I was no longer good at. And those failures, they were doing a number on my confidence and self-esteem. I needed to find something I could do. There was a voice inside me that was saying, make something. So I did, a paint by number. I could only work at that paint by number for about 15 minutes at a time before I needed to take a nap, but I loved that thing. It turned out that my new self was good at crafts. That led to more crafts, jewelry making, cross-stitching, and photography, more things I was good at. That led to an invite to participate in a creativity workshop at this conference. That was my 5-minute speech that I did, and I discovered something else that I was good at. That led to the realization that I wanted to be a speaker, which eventually led to keynotes, and here I am. And it all began with finding that first paint by number, that one small thing that the new me was good at. I chose this graphic because I liked the symbolism of the blocks. Figuring out what we can do, find something that we're good at, accepting our new selves. They all happen one block at a time. Thriving with brain injury. This is what all the hard work is about. Learning how to thrive while living with brain injury. Facing the sun and blooming where we're planted. The thriving strategy that you wanted me to talk more about was to own who you are. Don't apologize for having a disability. For many years, I apologized excessively whenever my brain injury symptoms showed themselves. When I needed help, when I had to leave events early, when I wasn't able to attend at all, when I overloaded, when I needed to rest, when I put my earplugs, headphones, or sunglasses on, when my emotions spilled over. Deep down, I was ashamed of who I'd become. I was ashamed of brain injury Carole. Non-disabled Carole was my standard. And because I couldn't live up to her, I felt the need to apologize a lot. Part of thriving is owning who we are, our brain injury symptoms, the accommodations we need, the strategies that we use. Living with a disability is nothing to apologize for. I give my sister credit for helping me learn not to apologize so much. Years ago, at a family function, I was getting brain tired. I needed to rest. I felt bad about leaving the gathering, like I was spoiling the fun, like my brain injury was an inconvenience, a burden, like I was a burden to everybody. So I apologized numerous times before going to rest. And later on, my sister asked me, why did I feel the need to apologize? Resting was just something I needed to do, not something that required an apology. There are times when insight hits us all at once. That was one of those times. And I realized that she was right, that I had nothing to apologize for, nothing to be ashamed of. It was time to own who I was as a brain injury survivor. Owning who we are, it doesn't change our brain injury symptoms, but it can change how we feel about them, how we present ourselves to the world. Owning who we are says, here I am as I am, without shame, without embarrassment. There is an internal power that comes from owning who we are. Here's what that looks like for me now. Owning who I am means acknowledging that I have brain injury symptoms that I can't always control, and sometimes they get the better of me. Owning who I am means knowing that I'm doing the best I can. Owning who I am means doing what I need to do to take care of myself. It means asking for help. It means not asking for permission for accommodations that I need. If I'm at a gathering and I need to go rest, I go rest with no shame attached. I can be sad that I had to miss some of it, but there's a difference between sadness over the circumstance and shame over who I am. It means apologizing when I've done something wrong, but not for being, and not for having a disability. Owning who we are claims our power and helps us to thrive. So you've now heard the 5 lessons that you chose for me to talk about. And as I talked about those 5, I'm sure you could see how the graphics influenced the words, that they enhanced the words. They bring the concepts to life in a way that just words on the page don't. But the problem is that you've only seen 5 of the 25. And I wanted to give you a sense of the whole of Silver Learners, all 25. To do that, I created a short video that pulls together all 25 lessons and their graphics, which I'm going to show now. As you watch the video, I invite you to choose one lesson that's most meaningful or most useful to you, whether you're a survivor, a caregiver, or a professional. Here's the video. So if you couldn't choose just one lesson while watching that, here's another option for you. Whenever I do a keynote, I like to have a giveaway for the audience, something that relates to the theme of my talk. So this time, in honor of my silver nuggets of learning, I purchased some silver nugget candies. And what I did is I made labels for them. Each candy has one of the lessons on it. And they're on my book table, which is out in the lobby. So if you weren't able to choose one lesson, feel free to stop by my book table, pick a candy or two, and you can let fate do the choosing for you. So now it's time to start wrapping up this speech. July 6th, the day of my car accident, is a day that symbolizes two events. It is an anniversary, the anniversary of the day that I became a brain injury survivor. But it's also a birthday. It symbolizes the birth of the new person that I became, the birth of the new life that I lead. When we celebrate birthdays, there is a tradition of adding one more candle to the cake, a one to grow on candle. So in honor of my 25th brain injury birthday, I have a one to grow on lesson to add in conclusion. Never give up. Whether you're a brain injury survivor, caregiver, or professional, whether the milestone you're thinking about is brain injury or something else, never give up on moving forward, on progress, on a meaningful, happy, productive life, on believing in yourself, on learning, on having dreams. Whatever milestone you may face, may you find your silver learnings. Thank you.